colleagues at Karger Publishers to speak to you today about research integrity and publication ethics. And first of all, I want to thank Worldwide Information Services for inviting you to this session. Yeah, they're really a great partner. And so thank you very much to WWIS. My job is just to give you a little bit information about Karger Publishers. Maybe you heard of us. We're not one of the very, very big publishers, but we are a big small or a small big publisher in Switzerland. And today the presentation will be done by my colleague, Grania McNamara, who is our Research Integrity and Publication Ethics Manager at Karger Publishers. She has a PhD on the genetics of behavior from Cardiff University, and has been working for herself in the academic world for 9 years, and has a lot of experience now in the publishing industry. She worked for other publishers as well. My name is Karger Bangert, and I'm the regional manager for South Africa. I'm working very closely with WWIS. So if you have any questions about journals, ebooks, or services, don't hesitate to contact WWIS or me personally. If you look at our new logo, which was created 4 years ago, you see a spark at the end of the word above the letter R. This stands for a spark, and we hope that this presentation and the thoughts and maybe also the discussion will enlighten you in your work, in your research. The mission of Karger Publishers, which is a worldwide biomedical publisher, is connecting and advancing health sciences. And we have about a bit more than 200 employees worldwide. We publish a little bit more than 100 journals, and more than 1/3 is already open access. We also have a book production, about 20 books per year. As we are a very old publisher coming from the 19th century, we have a lot of books available, and you find more information about that on our website, karger.com. We receive 20,000 manuscripts, of which about 7,000 are published each year. We have editors-in-chief and editorial board members all over the world, also in South Africa. And the whole machine works with more than 7,000 peer reviewers. And we are not only active in the core business of publishing, as we call it, journals and books, but we also try to offer services, smart services to students and young researchers to have an easier life in their research. And one of the newest services is Campus Courses, a platform how to learn to publish more successfully and to have less rejection in publishing than before. As I said, we're not one of the big publishers, but we are present in most of the continents, I must say. Here you see just a map of the different offices worldwide. At the moment, we're not in Africa, not in South Africa, but we have WWIS, so that works like that. And what is very important about Karger, and which is also a difference to other publishers, is that we are family. Karger is a family business, and was founded in 1890 in Berlin. And as we are now a very modern and open company, a woman is our boss in the 4th generation. It's Gabriela Karger. Yeah, and this was a very fast introduction, and but I just wanted to give you a picture of who we are. And I would now pass on to my colleague, Granier to speak about research ethics and publication ethics and research integrity. I will close my presentation, and Granier, you can open yours if you want.
Great. And maybe Gregor, you can tell me if it looks okay. Let me make sure I select the right thing. Now,
yeah,
do you see
looks
my
perfect.
slides? Okay,
looks
great.
perfect. Looks perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So yes, thank you to WWIS for hosting this and for the invitation. I'm really excited to talk about research integrity and publication ethics at Karger. This is my job, but it's also something I'm extremely passionate about, and I would love it if after the presentation, if you have any questions or you want to discuss anything, that would be really exciting for me as well. So I'm going to start off with some definitions. So apologies if some of this is very old information for you, but I wanted to start with what do we mean by research integrity and publication ethics, or RIPE, as we call it. What we're really talking about is sort of three interrelated topics that cover the research cycle from study inception all the way through to publication and promotion of the research. So we're talking about research ethics, like getting approval for your study, clinical trial registration, things that you and your colleagues will be very familiar with, all the way through to analyzing the data, drafting the manuscript and getting it published. So you may be familiar with some of the classic concepts from on research misconduct, like fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. However, at Karger, we take a look at RIPE with a much broader lens and consider anything that could undermine a reader's trust in a piece of research as relevant to research integrity. So as publishers of scientific content, and as Gregor said, particularly as publishers in the health sciences field, we're constantly mindful that our publications impact clinical practice, and therefore the accuracy and trust in scientific research is really our core motivation. So I think what I've just said could really apply to any of the publishers. So what about RIPE at Karger Publishers? So building on what I just said, I'm going to talk about three areas that we focus on to maintain trust in the work that we publish. This is split into kind of both proactive work that we do as well as some reactive work. And speaking of sort of reactive work, the first area of focus for RIPE at Karger Publishers is conducting investigations into concerns about our published content. Now, when concerns are raised after publication for any reason, we'll conduct an investigation. And if the results of that investigation indicate that the results in the article are unreliable, we will retract that article. So what that means is the article itself is updated with a watermark across every page, so it's clear to readers that the article has been retracted, and we'll also publish a statement explaining why the retraction was necessary. Now, while an investigation is going on, we may decide to publish an expression of concern, and this is to let readers know that there is an ongoing issue with the article, so that they can maybe interpret the results with caution. So for any of the post-publication notices that we issue after an investigation, we're really focusing on transparency to our readers about what happened and giving as much detail as possible. So that's a little bit vague, but I'm going to give you some kind of specific examples of the kind of investigations that we do at Karger later. So of course, we would much prefer to identify problems before publication. And so that's why we spend a lot of time at Karger developing policies and processes to ensure that the articles we publish are as robust as possible prior to publication. So a lot of this involves manual training for our editorial office, training with our editors, and developing policies for our authors to ensure that the articles we publish are as rigorous as possible. However, we are increasingly relying on technology. Gregor mentioned that we receive nearly 20,000 articles, manuscripts a year, and publish nearly 7,000 articles. So we're relying more and more on technology to inform the decisions made by the editorial office and our editors. And I'll give you some examples of that later on, how we are maintaining integrity at scale. So finally, of course, the best way to avoid a problem in an article is for it to have never existed in the first place. We know that some of the barriers or some of the issues that come up that block an article being published are often avoidable things that could have been dealt with at the start of the research itself. For example, I mentioned already research ethics, but also authorship issues are often a common barrier to publication where there's a dispute between authors. So this is why we engage with researchers directly on ethical research practices. I like to imagine this as sort of a house, the research as a house, and we really want to support researchers building strong foundations so that when it comes to decorating the house, with the publication of their research, the foundations aren't going to slip away and undermine it. So I'll go over some of the training that we provide for researchers later too. Okay, so I said I would talk about some of the investigations that we do. And this is an example of a case that was detected before publication. So a manuscript, in this case, the manuscript was submitted with an author list, went through the normal peer review process. Reviewers gave their opinion. It was sent to the authors to respond to the reviewers' comments as normal. When the authors submitted the manuscript in response to the reviewers' comments, we noticed that the entire author list had changed. Every single author on that manuscript was different. And not only that, but the institutions listed were totally different as well. So this immediately raised alarm bells. Why have all of the authors changed? And what we're seeing, we think, is most likely a case of authorship sale. So you may have heard of paper mills, and these are commercial entities that act to undermine the publication record by subverting the peer review process in one way or another. In this case, we believe that the new authors purchased their position on the author list with the probable goal of career advancement through maybe promotion or grant funding. So this is a problem not only because we want the right authors to get credit for any work that we publish, but often we know that articles originating from these paper mill entities often consist of fabricated or falsified research, which can skew the publication record. So why do we think that authors do that? Well, with career progression, as I'm sure the people on this call know very well, career progression being so frequently dependent on publication, it creates an incentive to skip a step or maybe cheat and get these publications through less honest means, like purchasing your place on an author list. Now, the example on this slide is an extreme example, but we do see this at a smaller scale where maybe one or two authors have, we believe, purchased their place on the author list. And so that's why we have really robust processes in place to detect and deter this, to make sure that we don't publish any articles from these sort of so-called paper mills. Now, of course, not all of the cases that we see are as straightforward as that example. Sometimes a problem only is identified when we're looking across multiple manuscripts and even across multiple journals. So what you're seeing on this screen is an example of what we call peer review fraud. So what you're looking at is 10 different review reports from different individuals across 5 different manuscripts and 3 different journals. So what is highlighted here is identical phrases across these different review reports. So for example, this sentence in blue appears verbatim in 5 different review reports from apparently different individuals. So this is obviously problematic and concerning. So at face value, all these reports appear legitimate, they're thorough, they are addressing the manuscript at hand. However, when you look across manuscripts, we can see that there's a problem going on with these review reports. How are supposedly different individuals writing the exact same review reports? So what we think most likely happened here is non-legitimate reviewers entered the peer review system to provide favorable reviews for the manuscript to increase the likelihood of that manuscript getting published. Now, this is like misconduct at a larger scale that is harder to detect. As I said, this occurred across 3 different journals, and so a single editor isn't going to be able to spot this. And so that's why research integrity and publication ethics at Karger acts across all journals and to detect these issues and conduct checks on our reviews and our reviewers to make sure that legitimate review reports are being submitted for our research. So I've mentioned a couple of times now having robust processes in place to detect misconduct as early as possible in the peer review system. So at Karger, we take a 5-pronged approach to upholding the integrity of our publications under the umbrella of SPARK. And I'm going to talk a little bit about 2 of those prongs and their processes now. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the importance we place on having clear policies, and specifically having clear, in this case, I'm going to talk about having clear policies for authors to support the publication of robust research. So at Karger, we believe that reproducible research is the underpinning of trustworthy research. And by that I'm getting at the fact that the ultimate guarantee of the robustness and the reliability of a finding is the ability for other groups to go then and repeat that same finding. And we really want to, at Karger, really want to make research reproducible by default. And that's why all of our research articles have a data availability statement so that readers know where they can access the original data for that article and how they can maybe reanalyze that data or use that data in another study. Now, these look like quite dry screenshots from our author guidelines, but actually really important. So Karger endorses the materials design, analysis and reporting framework. So what is that? That is a framework or a checklist for authors to ensure that enough information is present in the manuscript for another group to repeat the study. So you might have heard of the reproducibility crisis. It's kind of been discussed for a long time in psychology, and maybe more recently, some efforts have been put into this in oncology research. Well, from this, we know that one of the biggest barriers to result reproducibility is the fact that it's very difficult to design it's very difficult to design repeat experiments from the information that's present in the original article. So that means that another group of authors can't repeat the result because they can't design the same experiment because the article itself isn't detailed enough. So by endorsing the MDAR framework and asking authors to complete this checklist, the checklist prompts authors to add this information to the manuscript when they're writing it to increase the chances of result reproducibility. And then going back to what I said at the start, increase the chances of finding robustness and trustworthiness. So, of course, it's important that there's enough information in the method section and in the analysis sections to allow other researchers to reproduce the results. However, it's also really important that findings are communicated in a clear and detailed way. So clinical case reports, as I'm sure you are aware, are influential articles for healthcare practitioners. So these report novel or rare cases or novel treatments for conditions that can really impact patients' lives. Because of this impact on patients' lives, that's why it's so important that the reporting in a case report is detailed and provides as much information as possible on the condition as well as the treatment course. As well as their importance for healthcare practitioners, they're also healthcare practitioners' first article that they're writing. And we know that early career researchers often need extra support when coming to write their first manuscript or case report. So that's where the CARE checklist comes in. So similar to the MDAR checklist that we mentioned, the CARE checklist provides consistent structure to case reports, and that's easy to follow as an author, an editor, or a reviewer. And it gives authors a structure to follow so that they can write their case report with more confidence that it's going to be informative for readers. We really think that this completion of this checklist is really important for the subsequent use of case reports in clinical practice. And so that's why we've made completion of this checklist mandatory for all submissions to our 8 case report journals. We strongly believe that this is going to increase the consistency and as well as reporting depth in these important article types. So I spent a lot of time now talking about kind of manual processes and policies for our authors, but I said that we are increasingly using technology to inform decision-making around research integrity practices. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. So at Karger Publishers, we use technology to help the editors and the editorial office make informed decisions on manuscripts. So I'm sure most people on this call have heard of Authenticate or Turnitin, and this allows detection of text overlap between sources. So in our case, it allows us to detect if text in a manuscript is present in other publications. The editor then can use the text overlap report to assess whether the nature and the severity of the text overlap would constitute maybe plagiarism. What you may be less familiar with is some new technologies that allow us to detect image integrity concerns. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So at Karger, we use technology to inform decision-making now around image integrity concerns. So as you can see in this example from a recently retracted article at Karger Publications, there's really small areas of image duplication, both within a panel and between image panels. And this is kind of indicative of inappropriate image adjustment. Now, this is difficult to detect by eye. I think for people, it's like these small areas of overlap. It's hard to see, but very straightforward for technology to detect. So again, we use technical solutions to help inform the editor make a decision on whether the nature of the image reuse is appropriate. Now, I say that this is very hard for us to detect, but of course it's not impossible. I think if you've done a spot the difference picture puzzle as a child, you'll know that it's possible to stare quite intently at images and find things. So we're not solely interested in detecting image duplication kind of within a panel like this. As I mentioned earlier, we are aware of these paper mill entities, these commercial entities that will seek to subvert the peer review process and perhaps sell authorship or sell full research articles. Now, as I mentioned, often these research articles contain falsified or fabricated research. And a hallmark of this is the presence of the same image across multiple different publications, potentially representing different treatment groups and authored by totally different authors. So like detecting text overlap between sources, detecting the presence of the same image across multiple different publications would be nearly impossible for a person to do. And so that's why we rely on technology here. So I've showed an example from a recently retracted article where the same image panel was present in at least 3 different publications by 3 different author groups in 3 different journals. Now, it would be very difficult for me as research integrity and publication ethics managers to detect this. But once we use technology to find these issues, we can then assess the severity of this image reuse and then the next steps. So I've talked at the start about what we do after publication and what we're trying to do before publication to maintain the integrity of the articles that we do publish. But I said right at the start that really the best way to avoid an issue in an article is for it to have never existed in the first place. And that's why we offer training for researchers. As a publisher, we want to support researchers to get their research published ultimately. And we know that as errors at the start of the research cycle, for example, around research ethics or authorship or conflicts of interest, can stop a study being published. And if research has been done and that study isn't published, it's a waste of time for those researchers, but also a waste of resources for the funder and the institution. And so that's why we provide training for researchers on research integrity and publication ethics on topics across the research cycle. And we really focus here on kind of transparent and reproducible research practices. So for researchers, as well as online webinars that we occasionally run, we do run in-person workshops on research integrity practices. I've shown here an image from a workshop that we ran over the summer with researchers. Now this was loads of fun. It was really interactive. It brought together researchers from different institutions, different countries, different continents, and it was researchers from all different career stages, from PhD students to emeritus professors, and everyone came together and shared experience, shared their thoughts, and we had a really good discussion. But the key takeaway for everybody was like practical ideas that they could then go back and apply to their research straight away to improve the reproducibility of their research. This was fantastic, and it's great to be able to do things in person, but of course that's not possible and not accessible for everybody. So that's why we also provide interactive online training for researchers that's available in multiple languages. So Gregor already mentioned Campus at the start of this call, and one of the modules that we have is how to conduct ethically sound research. So this consists of 6 modules from subject experts and has interactive components to help especially early career researchers design studies that are going to have those good foundations, that it's going to make it easier to ultimately get that research published. So this is an inclusive and broad-reaching approach because we don't want geographical or language barriers to be an impedance to conducting ethically sound research and getting that research published. As well as providing training for researchers that are early in their career, we also provide training for reviewers that are early in their career. So again, we have online interactive training for peer reviewers. Now this consists of like a very introductory module on how to conduct scientific peer review, and then supports reviewers as maybe they've reviewed 1 or 2 manuscripts and want to get a little bit more subject specific expertise on how to review clinical research and how to review systematic reviews that has a little bit of extra nuance. These are, I think overall it's about 5 hours of training. It's really interactive, and we provide this training for peer reviewers free to all of our reviewers at Karger, because we see training the next generation of reviewers as a really important step in ensuring the reproducibility and trustworthiness of our publications. As well as this sort of more static online training that we have, we also run regular webinars on peer review, where we discuss with the attendees kind of hot topics in research integrity and peer review. So I've included here a QR code and a screenshot from a webinar we did last week for Peer Review Week on how peer review can improve reproducibility and kind of therefore good research integrity practices. The webinar, this is being recorded, as you know, and I think Gregor might circulate the slides later, so don't worry about getting these QR codes. You'll be able to get access to them later if you want to get to any of these resources. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour through just some of the things that we do at Karger Publishers to promote research integrity and publication ethics. We really focus on after publication, before publication, and at the research inception to support researchers in and maintain the integrity of our publications. And as I said, I'm happy to take any questions. I'd love to hear your thoughts about anything that I've talked about here, or maybe even anything I haven't talked about here. So please feel free to make any comments.
Thanks so much, Grania. That was really, really interesting, really good and reassuring to learn about the 3 areas of focus and how to maintain trust at Karger, and also the very robust RIPE processes and technical solutions to uphold research integrity. So, and I really, really enjoyed the training for researchers, the online training as well. So thank you so much for sharing. And there are no questions in the chat box currently, but I know that the audience will really appreciate the slides, especially for those QR codes as well. So that'll be great if you could send those through.
And at the end of the slides, we have some links as well as my email address and Gregor's email address. So if anybody looks at the slides later and has a question, please feel free to drop me an email. Yeah, I'd love to hear from anybody.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you
you.
also from my side. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I would really offer free trials for campus courses to South African researchers and institutions. I'm doing this as I'm also in charge of the German-speaking countries here in Europe. We are working with some medical faculties which organize campus-wide access to campus courses. And I would really love to do this for South Africa as well. So do not hesitate to have a look at those courses. We have about 10 courses in various fields, not only research ethics, but also how to write an article, how to write a systematic review. I think this could really be helpful for the researchers in South Africa. And I want to thank you very much also. Nadia, it was great to have you in this session. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Greg. And I'll be sure to just reiterate that the offer for a free trial in the follow-up email as well. Okay. And then I will get in touch if there is any interest.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grania and Gregor. Have a good day further.
Sorry to interrupt. I just saw that some questions have come in, so maybe I'll try to
Thank
quickly
you so much for alerting me. I didn't
answer them. So one question has come in about, is there a report in South Africa on falsification and fabrication of data, and please share links. So off the top of my head, I'm not aware of a South Africa specific report. There are some national reports that when Gregor emails over the slides, I'll include that just for some background reading. And if I can find, I'll ask some colleagues, and if I find anything that's South Africa specific, I will include that. I will say that what is typically said is that the rate of falsification and fabrication is generally probably underreported, especially because these things are often, like fabrication of research in particular, is difficult to detect. Peer review, as we know, is very trust-based. And that's why we're really active in the open science sphere, because we see the open science as the kind of antidote to this being able to hide fabrication behind, you know, just showing a graph in an article. So in answer to the question, I'll send some links so that you can have some background reading.
Great, that'll be great. I think there's also a question, what does RIPE stand for? I think she might have missed the beginning part of the session.
So it stands for Research Integrity and Publication Ethics, which is just a little bit of a mouthful. So I tried to shorten it to RIPE. Yeah, I hope that we'll circulate the slides later, and then you'll be able to see some of that, and the recording will be available as you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. And I see there's a lot of people saying it was really insightful, so thank you. I think that we've covered the questions. This is very important in training moving forward, so I appreciate the resources. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when I was a PhD student, this wasn't covered in our training. You know, you know, we knew not to plagiarize, we knew not to fabricate or falsify research, but some of the grayer area topics like conflicts of interest not being declared, as well as some image adjustment practices, is just something that's not covered at all. And so I completely agree with what you're saying, that this is important for training for researchers, because, you know, if you're not trained as a PhD student, you don't know what's acceptable if you don't have the training in it. So I completely agree.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, have a good day further.
Yeah, thank you very much, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Thanks everybody online for joining.